The night was alive with fire. It licked the horizon like a cruel tongue, devouring the meadow in 1,000 orange mouths that hissed and spat against the dark. Clara May Holloway staggered through the smoke, her thin arms clutching the frail weight of a child. Her dress was torn, her skin streaked with soot, her hair a tangle of copper strands that clung damp to her cheeks. The flames glowed in her eyes as though she carried part of the inferno inside her. She did not stop. Each step felt like a blade drawn across her lungs, each breath dragged through smoke and ash. Yet her grip never loosened on the boy pressed at her chest. He clung to her with surprising strength for his size, small fingers digging to the fabric as though afraid she might dissolve into the fire. He was Apache. Even in the fire's chaos, she knew it. The black hair plastered to his temples, the dust brown of his skin, the shape of his wide eyes fixed on her with silent terror. She had heard the names the townsfolk used for his kind: raiders, savages, killers. She had repeated them herself once, if only to mirror the voices around her. But when she found him trapped in the burning barn, his cries half smothered by smoke, the words had crumbled. What remained was a memory of her own childhood, shoved from door to door, branded an orphan, called burden, cursed thing. She knew the sound of being unwanted. It was the same sound that tore from his throat when the beams fell and fire closed in. Clara pressed on through the meadow. Sparks leapt like demons in her path, singeing her shawl. The boy whimpered, and she hushed him with a voice ragged but steady. "I've got you, Toza." She had asked his name as they stumbled out of the barn, and though his answer was faint, it had bound them. To speak a name was to carry a soul. She would not let his be lost. When at last a fire broke behind them, she collapsed on a patch of blackened earth. The night was vast, full of stars blurred by smoke, and the boy curled into her, trembling but alive. Her chest rose and fell with the ragged rhythm of someone who had run too long with nothing to run toward. She remembered the sneers of women at the well, the voice of Jedediah Crow sing she wasn't worth the bread she ate, the long silence of houses that took her in only to push her out again. She remembered hunger, shame, the ache of knowing no one would ever kneel for her. Now, in the dark with a child not her own pressed against her heart, she felt a strange heat that had nothing to do with the fire. It was purpose, raw and new, a dangerous thing for a girl who lived only in rejection's shadow. They found shelter in a derelict barn, its beams charred but standing. The wind carried the scent of smoke and wild sage, the floor dusted with straw and ash. Clara laid Toza down, gave him the last scrap of bread she carried, and wrapped him in her tattered shawl. He studied her freckles in the glow of the dying firebrand, reaching out a small hand to touch her cheek as if to prove she was real. Then, in a voice like the crack of a fragile twig, he whispered a word she understood without translation: "Sister." The sound filled her chest until her breath caught. She turned away quickly, blinking back heat in her eyes, afraid he might see the hunger in her not for food but for belonging. At dawn they walked toward town. Smoke still rose from the meadow behind, curling into a sky washed pale with morning. The boy's small hand clung to hers. She expected pity when the townsfolk saw them, but pity never came. Instead, faces tightened with suspicion, whispers rustled sharper than the wind. "Savage child." She's cursed herself. Clara felt their stares like stones against her skin. Jedediah Crow stepped forward, broad and grizzled, his voice thick with contempt. "You'll bring war on us, girl. Hand him over before more trouble follows." His words drew nods, mutters, the rustle of unease rippling through the crowd. Clara's shame burned hotter than the fire she crossed, yet her arms tightened around Toza. She said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only weapon left to the unwanted. The crowd might have pressed closer, might have torn the child from her, if not for the thunder that rose then from the horizon. Hoofbeats rolled like an earthquake. Heads turned. Against the dawn, 500 warriors crested the ridge, the earth trembling beneath them. Their horses' manes streamed in the wind. Lances glinted, and their leader rode at the front with the poise of a hawk descending from the sky. Nate! She did not know his name yet, but she felt his presence like stormlight. His eyes, steel gray with a gleam of fire, swept the town, then fell upon her. The crowd's fear swelled to panic. Hands strayed to rifles, whispers turned to curses, but Clara stood rooted, Toza's hand gripping hers. Her breath quivered, but her feet held. Nate dismounted in silence. Dust swirled around him, and the dawn painted his features with the hard beauty of carved stone. He looked at the boy first, then at Clara. The distance between them was filled with tension sharp as drawn wire. She saw judgment in his eyes, suspicion, and yet something else, an echo of recognition, as though he knew what was to stand apart from both worlds. He stepped closer, his gaze never wavering. Clara's knees threatened to give, but she forced herself still. The child pressed to her chest. The town's voices had fallen into a hush. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. In that silence, Nate turned to his people and raised his hand. What followed was not the scream of war, but the thunder of reverence. One by one, 500 warriors slid from their horses and bent knee to the earth. The sound was like a wave breaking, leather and sinew creaking. The earth sighed beneath the weight of so many bodies honoring one frail girl. Clara's chest heaved. For the first time in her life, she was not cast aside but seen, not burdened but bearer. Dignity flared in her like a second sunrise. She wanted to collapse, to weep, to press her face into the boy's hair and never let go. Instead, she lifted her chin, trembling, and met Nature's gaze. His lips parted, and though his words were few, they seared into her like brands. She carried one of ours through fire. We honor her. The crowd behind her shifted, whispers hollow now, robbed of their venom. Jedediah's face twisted, but he said nothing. Clara's shame was gone, burned clean the fire and sealed by 500 bent knees. She was still the orphan girl, still freckled and poor, but she was also something more: bridge, bearer, sister. The moment stretched, rich and unbearable. She felt the heat of Nature's eyes linger on her, not with the lust of mockery, but the hunger of recognition. Something passed between them, wordless but undeniable, a promise carved from silence itself. It curled low her belly, dangerous and alive, the kind of longing that could build empires or raise them. For the first time, she did not shrink from it. She allowed the fire to settle in her bones, to claim her as its own. The boy stirred in her arms, murmuring her name, and the spell broke. The warriors rose, but their eyes lingered with reverence. The town shrank back, small and mean against the vastness of what had just unfolded. Clara turned away from them, facing the horizon where smoke still drifted, where fire had tried to claim her and failed. Her heart beat with a rhythm she had never known. Not fear, not shame, but belonging. And if you had stood there in that dawn light, you might have seen more than a girl and a child. You might have seen how rejection can harden into courage, how shame can be remade into fire. You might have felt the tremble in her hands and the lift of her chin, the quiet ache that lived in her for years at last transformed into strength. And if ever you find yourself unwanted, cast aside, remember this: the fire that seeks to consume you may instead light a path others will one day kneel to honor.